If you walked in on a weird ritual, what would you do? You just found out your brother belongs to a secret cult. Oh, and now everywhere you go, strange dead girls are following you. Today I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the living dead girls in Shikabane Hime Aka. Now this boy is about to get thrown into the supernatural world. Uri-kun here wakes up in the dead of night with this mysterious cat with glowing eyes suddenly showing up at his window. But instead of going back to sleep, he decides to keep walking. And he doesn't go to just any place. He heads to the temple. And that's where things get weird, because inside the temple he meets this girl. Her body is bruised, but when he gets all close and examines her, he finds out that she's dead. And just when he gets some, well, lewd thoughts about planting one on a dead body, he hears the sounds of people coming, and our boy, Ori, is about to go to jail for a crime he knows nothing about. Well, that got dark real fast, and I got a lot of questions. Who's the dead girl? Why does she have so many injuries on her body? Did she come into the temple to die? Or was she brought in dead? Or wherever her body was found? Judging from how her body is still warm enough to deceive Ori into thinking she was still alive, it's safe to assume that this girl was still close to death a few minutes ago. And this means our boy had a chance to save her. It takes a human body about 12 hours to get cold after death and roughly 24 hours to get cold to the core. And usually rigor mortis sets in after 3 hours. But seeing as our girl's body is still totally fine and able to fool this guy, aside from the lack of, breathing, we can safely assume that breath barely escaped this girl's lips before Ori realized she wasn't breathing. So if we're in his shoes, I would immediately try to apply CPR or maybe resuscitate her by pounding on her chest with my fist. Chances are if we do it early enough, she could live. Either that or we do the next best thing. When you discover a dead body, maybe don't do anything to see if the spirit is still hanging nearby. And you can maybe summon it back into its body. The next thing our boy should have done was to call the cops and report a potential homicide. Irrespective of how long it takes for them to get there, he would have done his citizen's duty and the girl in question would have had a chance of getting a proper burial, as well as any shot at justice. But now thanks to him just for being here, he's going to be responsible for her death. The door opens and these men come in wearing strange robes. Ori manages to hide himself in time. When he looks at the men, he sees two people he recognizes, and one of them is his brother. And that's when his brother does something crazy. He hugs the girl, and just like a miracle, she comes back to life. Meanwhile, across town, the police raid an apartment of a man named Hagino. By day, he's a flashy, charming playboy with a harem of women who dote on him left and right. But the truth? He's been manipulating and murdering them. When the cops show up, Hagino laughs, jumps from the building, should have died. But does he? The next day, Ori's brother Keisei heads back to their orphanage home to say breakfast prayers with the kids. But while their eyes are closed, he steals their food, and when he gets caught, he tells the kids to call him Mr. Monk. And shortly after, Ori shows up with his box packed because he's come of age and is moving out of the orphanage. But instead of packing his things, he tells the folks to look after them while he heads off to school. In school, this beautiful babe tells Ori all about the mysterious lady killer from what she learned on the news. Machina, the girl Ori saw in the temple, is called a Shikabane Hime. She's an undead warrior bound to Keisei, Ori's brother. But Ori doesn't know that yet. Her mission is to hunt down Shikabane like Hagino before they turn the world into a bloodbath. And tonight she's armed with twin machine pistols and ready to take him down. And of course Hagino thinks he's unstoppable. His women surround him like an entourage, their bodies moving like dolls on strings. In a stained glass chamber, he rants about beauty, control, and his twisted version of love. And that's when Machina crashes in, spraying bullets, and they clash. Hagino whips out bone-like wings and binds Machina midair. He hurls himself through a glass window, dragging his harem behind him like trophies. Meanwhile, Ori, wandering the streets while moving his items to his new house, finds Machina's broken body on the ground again. And she looks dead-ish again. But when he reaches out, she slaps his hand away and rises like nothing happened. And that's when Ori learns that Machina can't die the way normal people do. Instead, she rushes back to the rooftop to finish what she started. It's not a pretty sight. She shoots Hagino into an electrical rig, blasting him with enough volts to fry his smug grin off of his face. And finally, with the last burst of gunfire, she puts him down for good. Because thanks to years of killing Shikabane, Machina only knows one way to kill them, and that is to put a bullet in their brains. Ori is obviously shaken, confused, but he's also intrigued. He heads home and finds his friends drunk and passed out on the floor. Turns out they were waiting for him for a welcome party, but he got detoured into the Shikabane world. The next day, a bus crashes onto the highway, leaving behind broken glass, silence, and grief. But as usual in this world, death is just the beginning. Instead, it sometimes leads to things much, much worse. Far away from the crash site, our boy Ori is living his ordinary life, and he heads back to his old orphanage to check on the children because one of the kids was friends with the victim of the crash. Meanwhile, the community holds a wake keeping for the victim, a girl named Hikaru-chan. However, they're all in for a big surprise. The ceremony happens and her coffin suddenly opens, and Hikaru comes back to life. Everybody freaks out and runs away. A few people call it a miracle, but everyone's in for a big surprise because that thing that came back to life is not exactly Hikaru-chan. At his part-time job, Ori makes a mess of things before learning from his new boss that the dead girl came back to life. As usual, his intrigue for the supernatural draws him towards Hikaru's house. While he's walking home from his job, he sees his, well, psychic cat. And at the same time, he notices there are lots of journalists at Hikaru's house. Ori follows his cat down an alley, but when he turns into the road, all he sees is Machina. Once again, Ori abandons all logic and chases after her. But when Machina steps into Hikaru's room, she's attacked by this alien-looking monster. The monster stabs her in her belly and is about to kill her. But when she's about to land the blow, Ori shows up and suddenly the monster changes into little Hikaru-chan and begs Ori to save her from Machina. And together they run away. Machina chases after them, but not before she gets a call from Keisei that the other children who died in the accident have also gone missing with their coffins empty. Machina gives chase while Ori takes Hikaru shopping with no idea that he's not talking to Hikaru. Eventually, they get to the playground and Hikaru's true nature shows up and the girl isn't human anymore. She lashes out, her movements inhuman, fast and deadly. And that's why she pushes away Ori, because he wouldn't let her enter the playground. Machina arrives with her guns blazing and there's no hesitation. But when she attacks, the monsters merge into a giant monster. And that's when Ori decides to join the fray. But he doesn't fight because he knows nothing about fighting, but he does appeal to her heart, or well, emotion, and shows Hikaru a picture that stops her dead in her tracks. And that's all the opening she needs. She jumps and shoots the living daylights out of the monster until all three separate, and with the help of her fellow people, they kill all the monsters. And at this point, Ori's seen enough death for one night, so he hands the picture from his orphanage sibling to Machina and runs away. When Keisei shows up, he tells the rest of the group not to worry about Ori because he can take care of him as his younger brother. But when he gets home, Ori's hands are still shaking for what he just saw, and he falls down by the door and breaks down into tears. The next night, this couple are busy trying to get all smoochy in the dark when they hear the sound of a baby crying. Before they can figure out what's going on, a baby Shikabane attacks, and luckily Machina is in the area. She catches them running and heads in the direction opposite of them, and this time Keisei is with her, but they arrive too late. The monster they're tracking has killed its victim and is running away. At school, Ori has a hard time concentrating because of all the gossip around a new baby Shikabane, all thanks to his newfound trauma. Later, he heads home, curls himself up in bed because he's caught a cold. That evening, he calls in sick at work and spends the rest of his day on bed. But Ori doesn't realize that his bosses at work are not what they seem. That evening, while resting in his house, Ori hears the sound of the crying baby and realizes he's been cursed. And then his cat guide shows up and informs him that no, he's not cursed, but the baby is calling on him for help, except he's not the only one searching for the baby. This monk locates the baby and heads out to do some monster baby killing. Meanwhile, Machina and her teammate named Minai chase after the ghost baby. Before they can catch up with it, another dead body is waiting for them. Machina is assigned to track the killer, and Ori meanwhile is still curious to a fault. Sick and half delirious, he follows the black cat again and stumbles to the front of a clinic. When the doctor comes out with a baby, he sees Ori lying outside, and he doesn't just abandon him because he's a good doctor, right? Anyway, Ori wakes up and he sees Machina meeting the doctor. But Machina isn't happy to see him, so she points her gun in his face when they're alone and warns him to stay away from her case. She goes to find a baby, which she thinks is the Shikabane. That's when the wall explodes and a female Shikabane crashes in, rampaging, and turns out this doctor has been experimenting and injecting corpse cells into humans, manufacturing Shikabane on purpose. Ori and Machina are then captured and strapped to operating tables. The doctor explains his twisted logic. The mother Shikabane goes berserk whenever the baby cries because he's using the child as a lead. He then decides to inject corpse tissue into Machina herself, curious as to what will happen to an already undead body. Yes, once again things are not exactly looking very bright for our dynamic duo. Ori getting tied to the table is one thing and understandable. He's a doofus. But Machina? That's more of a problem. The place is a hospital where there have been suspicions of a young Shikabane baby killing people. However, with all her knowledge of Shikabane, Machina should have been able to tell this was not likely the case. For one very simple reason. To become a Shikabane, you need to have regrets strong enough to tie you to the earth. So much so that it's strong enough to stay in your body after death. But this is something that babies really can't have, because babies hardly have a functioning reasoning mind. And even if they do, they don't have enough memories or emotions to tether them to life after their light goes out. Knowing this, Machina should have figured out there was more to the situation than just a dead baby going on a rampage. She suffered from something called tunnel vision, where she focused on a single problem or idea to the exclusion of everything else. Our girl wasn't considering any alternatives because a Shikabane was involved. If she just considered the possibility that it wasn't a baby. She would have been better equipped to deal with the doctor and his pet monster. Now, if they don't break out, Ori could end up dead, and Keisei will not forgive her. That's why we need to figure out a way to break free. Now, at this point, the evil good doctor has his back to Machina and Ori because of his experiment. That's all the time we need. Machina doesn't feel as much pain because she's technically undead, so all she needs to do is create some space between her and the rope by holding her breath and tugging in her body. Once this is done, she would need to wiggle like her life depends on it. Focus on one arm would make it easier to get a part of her body free, and then she can work from the freed arm to free the rest. In the alternative, she can take off her shoes to create some space on her leg. And, you know, since she's undead, she could force her body beyond its limits. She is a Shikabane and she's done this before. Once she's free, she'd attack the good doctor and knock him out before killing the Shikabane and freeing Ori. Because we all know if Ori gets free before she finishes handling business, he's gonna get in her way and probably die. Machina tanks the injection like it's nothing, rips her restraints, and she declares her name and unleashes a full barrage on the mother Shikabane. She then turns the guns on the doctor until Keisei shows up and stops her. The sex rules are clear. Living humans, no matter how twisted, cannot be executed on the spot. The next day, Keisei arranges a future for the baby. Ori is told he must have imagined what he saw, but he knows better. And then the real gut punch, when Keisei returns to check on the doctor. He finds out the doctor has been stabbed. Meanwhile, a little distance from the clinic, a stranger licks blood from his hand, smiling in the shadows. The next day, Ori and Keisei get into a mini argument, but after Keisei leaves Ori's room, we get to meet this lady, and despite how cute she looks, there's a body stuck in the ceiling, and it's the body of one of her workers. Turns out our J-pop star over here is a Shikabane who has refused to move on because of her love for music and stardom, and now she's hunting whoever doesn't appreciate her music. However, when her manager leaves her room, he gets an anonymous call from our blood-licking dude, and he warns the manager that the J-pop star is being targeted by Shikabane Hime, probably Machina. Meanwhile, Ori can't take away his mental itch, so he decides to scratch it by looking into Machina's real family and how they died. But what he doesn't know is that while he's looking into her, Machina and his brother Keisei are getting ready to track down the J-pop star, named Kun Osaki. Machina locates her station and decides to pay her a visit, disguised as a pizza delivery lady. But when she gets in there, she's in for a rude awakening. Osaki pulls out her inner black canary and sends Machina flying. And then her goons show up, ready to rough-handle Machina. She threatens them with a gun and makes her way towards Osaki, but she slips up, and the goons surround her at the same time as some of them capture Keisei. And with everything happening, Ori decides it is the best time of day to put on his investigation cap and look into the death of Machina's family. He visits the family home, led by this strange black cat again, and that's where he finds out that the entire house was burnt down. That's not all, because he also finds Machina's grave. And Machina shows up and they have a short heart-to-heart conversation, and when they're done, Ori decides to help Machina destroy Osaki-kun. Together they head back to her hotel, where she's already throwing a tantrum for not being able to hold her live performance as planned. The battle starts and Osaki morphs into a full-on monster, but Machina is seen worse. Machina attacks and gets bloodied up in a few seconds. Ori watches not knowing what to do, till he hears a familiar voice. Keisei, tired of the games, reveals himself for what he really is, Machina's contracted monk. He helps Machina heal from her injuries and joins the battle against the Shikabane by displaying some Aizen-level magic tricks. Keisei also plays Osaki's music and gets her to lower her guard, before giving Machina the chance to deliver the finishing blow. In a split second, the Shikabane dissolves. After taking care of business, Machina gives Ori and Keisei space to talk by walking home alone. Ori and Keisei head home together, and Keisei uses the opportunity to give him the full rundown of what the Shikabane Hime is all about. Basically an undead hunter that hunts other undead creatures while working with Keisei's sect called the Kogon sect. But while they're sharing this, these group of unfortunate students finds this really sweet looking car with keys inside and no driver. They decide to take it for a spin, however midway through the drive, the driver realizes he's lost control of the car. And the car comes alive and tells them that only one of them will be leaving there alive. But instead of letting them slug it out to determine who lives, it kills everybody inside and goes back to a parking lot where the strange monk is waiting. And he uses a cube to collect all their blood while smiling like the Joker. Well, that sucks. Here's what we gotta do differently. Step 1, don't enter the car. But anybody who's watched a lot of horror movies, you generally know not to go into a creepy car that shows up even though it looks cool and there's no person around it, because the chances are that you're gonna be playing with something outside of cash, like, oh, I don't know, for instance, your life. That's why as soon as the car shows up, you just turn around, go in the opposite direction, get as far away from the car as possible. But in the instant, like where these doofuses, we do enter the car, our lives aren't over just yet. First, we gotta see if we can break the glass. Yeah, they'd get some injuries, but on the long run, they would be surviving death. And it sounds like a win to me, but here's where it gets tricky. Considering the car's alive, it wouldn't be a hard stretch to think that the glass of the car has been reinforced or would be difficult to break. You gotta use a little bit of of science to break the spiritually reinforced glass. It's generally acknowledged that salt is corrosive. Just how corrosive is it, and how useful can it be is what we're gonna find out. In the circumstances, there's no weapon to fight with, no tool we can use to break the glass just yet. And because the students aren't preparing for this kind of situation, we don't have access to salt. But that doesn't mean we're not without help. We have naturally occurring bodily fluids like sweat and urine, and due to their highly concentrated salt content, these will be our weapons in the fight against the supernatural. Now hear me out, there are guys and girls in the car and someone's gonna have to take one for the team and do a little bit of pee to the glass. Once they identify the glass they want to break, one of the dudes will take a leak by the window. The leak will serve a dual purpose of corroding the glass slightly and also purging it of the spirit influence. Because like we said, salt chases away evil spirits. And once the glass has been, well, sterilized with pee, we will use our hands to break it open and jump out like we originally planned, since we removed the spiritual reinforcement. And that way we would come out with a few injuries, but with our lives intact and also in desperate need of taking a shower and using some hand soap to wipe off the pee. The next day at school, this new chick shows up and immediately she sees Ori, waves at him, and makes his friends jealous. During break, she finds him and tells him that he looks like her dog. That's why she waved, and she's not the only new person in school, because all the girls are fawning over this new nerd-looking teacher. Meanwhile, back at the Kogo sect, Keisei faces a suspension from duty for revealing info about their sect to his brother. His temporary replacement is chosen. As he leaves, he explains to Machina that part of the reason for his suspension is that the sect suspects him of working with the rogue monk. But what he doesn't realize is that Ori is about to get wrapped up in all sorts of rogue monk business. Because this cutie pie from earlier meets Ori after school and tells him to join her in exploring the rumors around people eating car. He says no at first, but his, well, virgin mind is too weak to resist. That night, they get in the car together, but luckily Machina shows up just in time and decides to join them. And as the journey continues, the chick, Yamagami, points out that she's lost control of the car. But then she whips out her weapon and gets ready to kill Ori because the car says if only one person is left, it'll stop. However, Machina's not having it. She pulls out her twin babies and starts shooting at the car until it vomits Ori and falls off a cliff. However, when Ori lands, he's face to face with the rogue monk. But the rogue monk tells him a different story about Shikabane Hime. He explains that while Ori sees them as good Shikabane that take care of the evil ones, they're really just selfish people who kill 108 Shikabane in the hopes of getting to heaven once they're done. But before Ori can get any more of this from the rogue monk, Yamagami shows up with 2 guns of her own. Turns out she's also a Shikabane Hime, and as for her contracted monk, it's none other than Mr. Nerdy Sensei over here. Meanwhile, back at Ori's part-time job, these Kogon sect members show up and discuss Keisei's fate because they think he's linked to the rogue monk, Akasha. And it's all because Keisei and Akasha were roommates before they became full-blown monks. But the real story of why he became a rogue is much darker. However, the monks plead with Ori's boss to take care of everything because he's the only monk with a Shikabane that has been given the license to kill. Back on the mountain, Ori gets interested in Akasha's tale, but Yamagami is a little too eager to stop him, and that's why she punches Ori in the face and exposes his crimes of killing many children with the ghost car, all because he was trying to create Shikabane for his dirty use. And after convincing Ori to use his brain and run away, Yamagami attacks Akasha, but he activates some weird domain magic and our girl loses her ability to move. At the same time, Machina spends a few minutes talking to Ori, but that's when she gets caught slacking. When she lifts up his face, she doesn't find the ghost car, and then out of nowhere, this weird car binds her to itself, and luckily Keisei shows up just in time to save her from the car, and he cuts off her arm to free her, and Machina lets her gun do the rest. And after getting pushed around for a bit, Machina lands. Machina finally finds the head of the Shikabane car monster and kills it for good. After taking care of the monster, Keisei and Machina show up and chase down Akasha. They find him with his domain activated, but Mr. Nerd Teacher has already got his butt handed to him, and Machina quickly attacks and frees Yamagami from Akasha's control. And together they shoot until they find the source of his domain, a red box filled with the blood of Shikabane. Keisei grabs the box and pulls out some ancient ninjutsu so dangerous that even Akasha is afraid for his life. And just then Ori's boss shows up from the workplace, and from a safe distance, they try to snipe Akasha down for good. But as you expect from people who don't work often, they miss their first and only surprise chance, and Akasha takes the opportunity to run away. Because Keisei has been exposed to the blood of over 108 Shikabane due to his dangerous technique, he passes out. The next day, these kids join a train, and this dude in glasses has no trouble evidently of killing humans. As soon as the kids get off the train, he finds the kids messing around, but when one of them bumps into him, he morphs into his Shikabane shelf and throws the kid onto the train tracks, and our boy gets squashed like a bug under the train. After the battle on the mountain, Keisei is forced to bed rest because he's kind of in a coma, but Ori's part-time boss took the opportunity to tell his Shikabane Hime all about Akasha. Turns out Akasha Shishido was the lone survivor of a suppression unit sent after powerful Shikabane, and his partner Hime was split in two during that mission. Unable to restore her, he decided to kill her instead, and then he stole ritual scriptures, killed a bunch of monks, and vanished. His rogue doctrine becoming the seed of what follows. Back in the present though, the school's gossip turns into a lead. Ori is shown an old blog by an ex-classmate, a kid once rumored to have been electrocuted, and the rumor's true in a worse way, because Mitsuyoshi reappears as a Shikabane whose curse manifests as terrifying telekinetic power. And that night, Ori goes to check on Keisei, but instead he links up with Machina, and she warns him to stay away from Shikabane and his business because she's on a revenge mission to kill the people that killed her family. Night falls, and as usual, Ori can't stay away from trouble, so he runs into Mitsuyoshi, and the boy's power throws the fight into chaos, and he believes that he's a champion of justice, and that's why Ori's Takuno Jutsu has no effect on him. Luckily for Ori though, reinforcements arrive just in time. A new Shikabane Hime named Minai and her code handler Tsuji Isaki join the fray. For the most part, it's just Minai getting her butt handed to her by the monster because Mitsuyoshi has a special ability. He can reflect any damage done to him, and as soon as Ori faces this, he grabs the monster and jumps off the cliff into the sea. Is it dumb? Yeah. Could he kill him? Oh, absolutely. Because our boy doesn't know how to swim. However, before he gets a chance to even cross the pearly gates, Minai jumps in after him. After she saves him, they hide in a cave, but just when the monster shows up to attack them again, Machina jumps into the scene with her guns in front. She shoots the monster's right arm and gets no damage because her own right arm was already destroyed. And with her help, Minai gets ready to turn the tide of the battle. Minai and Machina attack together, but Minai's attacks continue to reflect on her body, and that's when Ori decides to use 110% of his brain power, and he calls the one person that Mitsuyoshi cares about, her classmate. And when Mitsuyoshi hears the voice over the phone, he goes down memory lane to the good times they had together. And that hesitation is all a girl needs about Mitsuyoshi's power from his berserk mode. And that's when Minai easily ends him for good with a karate chop. Later, Machina heads down to Keisei's place, but the pervy monk is back on his feet and is already looking for trouble. And that's not the only trouble brewing, because Minai's monk Isaki is in trouble. On the night they're facing off against Mitsuyoshi, he rough-handled some thugs, and now they're back for revenge. They pepper spray Isaki, drag him into a corner, and kill him in a matter of seconds. Meanwhile, Ori and Minai are getting close, but that's when she feels it. Her connection to her contracted monk, the only thing keeping her sane after death, dissolves. And with Isaki dead, the Kogun sect gets ready to track down Minai because without her contracted monk, she's just another Shikabane getting ready to go on a rampage. This cute-looking Shikabane Hime attacks Minai because she can't bring herself to end Minai's life before Ori decides to take matters into his own hands. I kid you not, his meddling is gonna get someone killed. He grabs Minai despite her already begging to turn into a monster, and they run away. However, being as naive as he is, Ori takes Minai straight to the lion's den. He hides her with his boss at his part-time job, and they warm their way into Minai's heart by telling her they can form a new contract with her with Ori before time runs out. But when she's not looking, they kill her as quickly as possible. And that night, this group of adventure-hungry students decide to go peeking through a haunted house, and this douche gives them the history of the building. But while he's talking, one of the students sees a corpse on the floor, and that's when things start to happen. The corpse slowly morphs into wads of cash, and the douche decides to grab some of the cash. Now everyone knows not to touch a ghost's stuff, but this guy doesn't. As soon as he picks up a piece of paper, the ghost gets mad and decides to take its cash back. It attacks the students, but this babe in a cap is there to help them. She's calm, collected, and helps them get away until she's attacked. Her cap falls off and is none other than Machina Chuan. She pulls out her gun, shoots the stuffing out of the monster, and Machina doesn't realize that she's lit a fire in this girl that's watching her. When the girl wakes up the next morning, Machina is gone, but the fire in her heart has just started. She takes some time to search for Machina and eventually finds her arguing with Ori in the street. And Ori's hell-bent on finding Minai, but even Machina doesn't know what really happened to her. And in school, Ori has a run-in with the mystery girl, whose name is Kasuga, but he's not interested because he has no idea that she's on his tail. Now this is crazy. Kasuga just went out of her way to find Machina's location, which is great that she found her because she was trying to learn more about the supernatural world. But if she were an opponent of a Shikabane, this would have turned dark very quickly. It's all because Machina doesn't have any regard for her own safety. Sure, I understand that she's already dead, but she technically can't die any more than she is, but she forgets that she's not working alone. Her actions put a lot of people in danger around her. That's why we need to do things a little differently. For instance, the main reason why the stalker is able to track her is because she goes around fighting monsters in the presence of kids without using a mask. Now, I'm no expert, but you think that superheroes usually hide their faces for a reason. Think about it, Ma could have just taken out time to wear a mask before going into a room full of kids who are easily impressed. She would have saved herself from getting a run-in with a stalker, and that's not even all of it. Although Machina is partly to blame for her lax attitude, the monks also share the blame. From what we've seen so far, these monks are able to use some form of ninjutsu type stuff to cast magic spells or whatever that either protect their Shikabane or harm their opponents. That means somewhere in their long list of Buddhist training manuals, there's likely something about protective charms that will hide locations or spells for making people that enter a location without invitation lose their way. With all of this at their fingertips, all they had to do was put up some protective barriers around the residence. That way, it wouldn't matter if it was a Shikabane stalker or just a random fangirl. Our monks and the Shikabane Humes would have been safe. But in this circumstance, what should you do if you notice you're being stalked? Easy. Don't panic. Panicking makes you seem more like a victim and easier pickings. And that's only the beginning. If you're in an area you know, with swift emergency response, then dial 911, and it's also better to be protected from a misunderstanding than to be discovered as a victim later. And if you're not, then find a crowded area and ask for help, although you'd probably be talking to a lot of strangers. Thanks to human decency, there's a large chance that you would get people willing to help you and protect you from Mr. Stalker. After school, she meets up with him to ask about Machina, but Ori ends up seeing his black cat on her shoulder. When he tries to grab the cat, his hands end up on, well, melons. So she uses the opportunity to properly slap him, and she warns him to stay away from Machina because Machina is her savior goddess. At home, Keisei tells Machina how he adopted Ori, and turns out our boy was an emotionless orphan until he stumbled onto Black Cat one day. He adopted the cat and started learning emotions because he was caring for the cat. Well, until the cat died in a car crash. Keisei taught Ori to manage his expectations and grieve for the dead and move on. But what he never knew was that the cat became Ori's first Shikabane, and Ori had been seeing the cat from that tender age. That night, Kasuga waits for Machina at the door of her shrine, and when she comes out, Kasuga tries to get friendly with her, but Machina dismisses her quickly and points out that she knows nothing about death, and the poor girl cries and runs away. But Machina heads in because she just saved herself from a fate worse than death. The next day, Keisei heads to the Kogun headquarters to find out what happened to Minai himself. He barks up the wrong tree and gets into the bad books of the strongest Shikabane Hime. But he doesn't care. Unfortunately, the head of their sect, this weird-looking dude, shows up and all the monks bow to him. He walks up to Keisei and gives him the answer he's been looking for by telling him that Ori delivered Minai to the inspector that killed her by himself. With this piece of information, Keisei is able to piece together who the inspector is. Meanwhile, at school, Ori gets wrapped up with Kasuga again, and this time she gives him a book about a special cult that produces Shikabane by making their disciples burn themselves alive just to come back as Shikabane. Ori gets intrigued because he feels that there may be a way to save Shikabane through this new cult. However, while he's considering visiting them, trouble is brewing. Machina has a nightmare about the day that she died. But her enemies are closer than she knows. And that evening, these unfortunate students are heading home to where this duo walks past them casually. But as soon as they pass, a Shikabane monster, like a giant caterpillar, shows up and eats the poor students. But their destination is the same with Ori, because that evening, Ori heads down to the new cult to watch one of their programs. But while the broadcast is going, the Shikabane group accosts the founder of the cult, and they tell him that his gig is up, because they know the only way that his disciples come back to life after being burnt is because they're already dead, and they're all Shikabane. They scold him for using the Shikabane for his personal gain, even though he's already dead. However, he uses his curse to try and hold them down. But being Shikabane, they are more powerful than him. And that's when this weird-looking girl kills him eventually, because they're a group that want the Shikabane to be feared, not used as tools. Back in town, Keisei heads down to Ori's part-time job, but as soon as he hears the voice of the shop owner, he realizes that it's his classmate from monk school, and he begs the dude to keep his brother safe. But as soon as he leaves, the shop owner decides to pack up and move because monks are not supposed to know about him and his Shikabane Hime. And that's not all, because Akasha decides to have a meeting with the Shikabane group that killed the new sect priests. They're called the Seven Stars, Shikabane without heart and hell-bent on fulfilling their pent-up desires of killing. But he's not the only one looking for them, because Machina is also looking for them to get a revenge because they killed her parents, and well, technically they killed her too. Back at the Kogon headquarters, the monks start an investigation into the Seven Stars. But while their investigation goes on, Aksha proves his determination to annihilate the Kogon sect to the Seven Stars, and they welcome him as their ally. And immediately he spills the tea on all the Kogon secrets and even advises them on which faction of the sect to attack in order to destroy the group completely. Later, Keisei links up with the big boobed one over here because he's trying to create a defensive spell to protect his kids at the orphanage. Machina joins the meeting, but as soon as she sees the picture of the Seven Stars, she goes berserk and nearly breaks the other girl's hand with her grip. When they leave, Machina runs into Ori, but when he learns that he ran into Seven Stars, she almost breaks his nose, but she lets it go and walks off. Inside, Keisei takes his time to make Ori's birthday meal, but makes him promise to not eat it till the next day. While preparing the meal, Keisei tells Ori of his story with Machina and her family, and when he's done, Ori realizes that his brother is still the same dude that he's known forever, despite how dark and twisted the Kogan sect seems. That evening, Ori heads off for a stroll, and he helps a kid pick up her ball and she thanks him by shaking his hand. But what Ori doesn't know is that she is a Shikabane and part of the 7 stars. And by nightfall, the effect of the handshake begins to show. Keisei takes his time to prepare a special curse warding magic to protect the children in the orphanage. But while he's prepping, this Shikabane spreads sleeping gas through the area, and Keisei isn't moved but heads out to face the 7 stars monsters with Machina by his side. Ori's cat drags him out of the house, but that's when he notices weird marks on his hand. When he tries to observe it more closely, his hand acts on its own and grabs him by the neck. Meanwhile, back at home, Keisei's discovered that he's about to face off against both the 7 stars and the rogue monk, Akasha. Immediately the fight starts, and Akasha proves why having a heart will put you at a disadvantage. Although Akasha's new technique is not as powerful as before, he quickly sends some of his Shikabane to attack the children in the orphanage. And Keisei can't have that, so he rushes to the orphanage, leaving Machina alone to face 7 stars. However, when he enters the corridor, Ori is waiting for him, and he's got something on his mind. Keisei doesn't realize that Ori is being controlled by the Shikabane. Ori draws him close and stabs him in his stomach before Keisei can make any moves, and that night fractures into violence. After the chaos that left Ori briefly possessed, the orphanage becomes a battlefield of grief and fury. From the shadows, Akasha strikes, and his attack leaves Keisei even mortally wounded. The monk, who had stood both as guardian and brother, now bleeds out with no way back, but he doesn't go down without a fight. As soon as the gas Shikabane fighting Machina enters his range, he grabs the monster and feeds it a poison that makes its body physical. And that's not all. He channels his final energy into his magical spell and sends Akasha flying. Even the rogue monk is impressed with how determined Keisei is. However, Keisei's last moments draw closer because he doesn't want Machina to end like Minai. In his last moments, he makes a choice. With what strength remains, he transfers his contract with Machina to Ori, binding our boy to the Shikabane Hime with his dying hand. The effect is immediate. Machina surges forward, driven by grief and a new resolve, and brings Kawako down in a storm of fury. The monster falls, but the cost nearly breaks Ori, his body collapsing under the strain of a bond he technically had been looking for all his life. Because our boy had never been a monk, Machina uses his life force and drains him so badly that he passes out, and from the looks of things, he's not going to survive either. Well, could this get any worse? Probably. I mean, right now Keisei's dead, or he's almost dead, and all of this could have been avoided. Hear me out. So the Kogun sect was already looking into the 7 star and the Akasha issue. From all the evidence available, Keisei knew they were coming for him, and that's why he decided to protect the children with his multi-layered spell. But it got me wondering, if he had time to discuss with Big Boobed One over here and her Shikabane, as well as prepare the protective barrier for the kids of the orphanage, then why did he go into battle alone? Now hear me out, it's a no-brainer. Instead of having to take all the law into your hands, Keisei could have involved the rest of the Kogun sect. Think about it. The threat was not just to him or those he cared about, it was a coordinated attack on the entire Kogun sect, meaning the only way to end the threat for good was to pull their resources together and fight as a group. Had they done that, they could have very well defeated this and the 7 stars monsters together, and everybody would have lived. And since we're dealing with 7 stars here, they would have been on high alert, and that's not all. Keisei only got vulnerable because he got stabbed by Ori, and I blame him partly because, I mean, sure, he wants to keep his brother away from all the madness, except Ori already stumbled into that world and there was no keeping him out again. So why, instead of trying to keep him like a novice and not tell him anything, they could have given him some protective spells to ward off Shikabane, and even if Keisei had taken out the time to protect his brother adequately, he technically didn't even have to do it himself. If he was with a group surrounded by other competent top-level monks from the Kogun group, one of them could have kept an eye on Ori, and Keisei would have been free to handle things on his end. There was no reason for Keisei to die, and in the end, his life will not have run out. Then in the quiet aftermath, Akasha reappears. Instead of finishing them off, he heals Ori's wounds, a mercy that shows despite his evil disposition at his heart, Akasha still cares for his former teammate and his friend Keisei. The night closes not with victory, but with a loss. Keisei is gone and the orphanage stands scarred. Machina carries another layer of sorrow, and Ori walks in a world that he can't escape. Bound by the contract, he is no longer just a bystander. The war against the dead has claimed him, and there's no turning back.
After getting saved by his enemy, Ori wakes up to the weight of Keisei's death. The sect plans his funeral and holds a wake keeping for him. Ori watches from inside the compound, but when he steps out, he finds all the Shikabane Himes there, except they refuse to come in, and he's gonna find out why soon. Before that, the district head monk informs Ori that Keisei didn't become a Shikabane. Later, Ori meets Keisei's mentor and learns about his brother's past and the initiation into the Kogun sect, and that's when he gets a proper rundown of what the Shikabane Hime is and how they operate. Once that's done, the district head informs our boy that despite having a contract with Machina, he's not suited to be a contracted monk, so he has to hand over the final piece of his brother back to the sect and leave their supernatural world alone. Although he's adamant, Ori understands, because he almost tasted death when the contract was forced on him. Instead, he asks Machina, and that's when he learns that because Shikabane Hime are defiled beings, they're not allowed at the funeral. After that, Ori heads home and reminisces on his time with Keisei. That night, he heads back to the funeral, but he finds find his part-time boss, and that's when our boy learns that dear old master was a monk all along. He pieces all the information together and asks his former master how he can become a better contracted monk. Instead of blowing him off like all the others, the master directs him to a special training mountain. With a fierce determination in his eyes, Ori sets off to learn the sacred art of contracted monking. And although he had no idea what the mountain held for him, he was certain of one thing: no one was taking Machina away from him.